What is happening, everybody? Welcome to episode number 31 of the Bards of Gaming podcast, where this week is going to be another spectacular solo episode where I am going to document and journal my thoughts on Final Fantasy 1. We are taking it way back today, all the way back to 1987, kinda, because I played this game on the mobile version like I've been doing with a lot of the Square Enix Classic Collection, being Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, whatever. But before we get into the episode, I'm just going to make my intro, make my little announcements, and then we'll get right into the episode and talk about the game. First things first, the greatest news in my life is I just got engaged, and I'm super happy about it, and I'm going to tell the world. We spent the last couple weeks traveling Asia. We finally had our vacation. We went from Thailand, we were there for about a week, to Japan, and I proposed right in front of Mount Fuji. We had a hotel called at the Fuji View Hotel, and if any of you follow me on Instagram, you'll have seen that post. I never really post my face on Instagram, but that is the one exception. I posted me and my fiance, and we were very happy, and it was a phenomenal vacation until I caught COVID. It's funny, actually, in that photo, I was sick as a dog. I proposed very sick, but it was the only day that we had a clear view of Mount Fuji, and I had to make it work. But I was not aware that I had COVID. I thought I just got hit with like some nasty sinus infection from a plane or something like that. But I'm all good. I'm back. My voice is a little bit raspy because of all the coughing and all the crap I've been through in the last week with it. But I'm good. We're all good. Speaking about being in Japan, again, if any of you follow me, I'm pretty sure I posted. I can't remember honestly, but I had a haul of retro games in Akihabara. So I just want to talk about that because this is a video game podcast, and I have to say some of the treasures that I've found. So, first off, I got 3 consoles, technically. I got an N64 at Super Potato in Akihabara, and it was the gold N64, which was available in Japan and in the US only as a Toys R Us exclusive. So I'm very happy I got one of those. I also got a Super Famicom, which just a regular Super Famicom, nothing special, no special edition or anything like that. But very happy to finally have one of those consoles. I had one growing up. My dad had one, but I never really played it. So I got that. I got a bunch of games for it. Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3. I got some of these Sailor Moon games that my girlfriend played when she was younger. They're pretty cool. They're like beat 'em ups. And then I got some Doraemon platformers for any of you who may be familiar with Doraemon. Not so much a character that's popular here in America, but very popular in Asia, apparently, which I was not aware of. Hang on one second, my cat is eating my wire. So, in addition to those 2 consoles, I also bought myself a Game Boy Advance SP, and I was thinking about going and getting one when I was over there. I've been wanting a Game Boy Advance for a while, because I've spoken with some other friends. And I mean, I had one when I was a kid. It stopped working, so obviously I don't have one anymore. I do have one now, but I haven't had one in a long time. And also listening to Adam Blank over at Remember the Game, he talks about so many Game Boy Advance games, and I'm thinking to myself, I've missed out on a lot of really great games, and I didn't realize how great some of the games on the Game Boy Advance were. So I'm going back, and I'm trying to play some of the things that I've missed out on over the years. And the first game I get, I bought it off DK Oldies, and I actually got a pretty fair price for it, I think, because it's impossible to find anywhere. But it was The Sims Bustin' Out for the Game Boy Advance. I played its sequel. I played The Herbs a lot when I was a kid, and I'm dying to go back and play that. I hope I can still find my childhood copy, but I never played Bustin' Out, so I'm having a really good time playing through that right now, and I'll definitely make an episode about that once I'm done with it. But those are pretty much my main announcements regarding my last couple of weeks since stepping away and going on vacation. Some major life updates. Very, very happy. And I say now let's jump right into the episode because I don't have really anything else to talk about. Nothing else major coming up. So you know what, real quick. I did make a post about some of the recent games that I've completed, being Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 2, Call of Duty from 2003, like the original. There's a couple others I put in there, but I also did put in Game Dev Tycoon, because I did promise one of my earliest listeners that I would cover that game, and I feel so bad. Trust me, when I say I'm going to cover a game, I don't forget about it. It's like I've said before. There's just I'm very busy a lot of the time with my day job, unfortunately. So it's like some games that I feel like I want to cover more in depth, or I want to play more. I don't end up covering, and things kind of get put to the side. I got to get better at scheduling and getting my shit together for the show. Unfortunately, the show ends up taking a bit of a back seat when it comes to the priorities of my job, my school, and the show. But I am very excited to cover that, and I hope you're still a listener. I am so sorry it's taken so long. I will get there. I have not forgotten. So there are a bunch of games that are on the list. I have everything written down. I just haven't really gotten to it yet. So I do apologize. I have a hell of a backlog. All right, so with that being said, let's jump straight into the episode. All right, so as mentioned in the intro, this week I'm going to be sitting down and documenting, journaling, talking about, ranting about, praising Final Fantasy 1. Now, I played Final Fantasy 1 very recently, like a couple weeks ago. I beat it, and I played it via the Pixel Remaster on iOS. So I gotta say, the Square Enix has been doing a really good job porting a lot of their old games to iOS. I haven't played Chrono Trigger, but I have played, like I've said before, like the first 5 Dragon Quest games over the last couple years on mobile, and I've played now the first 2 Final Fantasies on mobile iOS, and they play really well. I can't praise them enough for that. The controls are very easy. I will say I think that Dragon Quest did it a little bit better, but it's still, I like Dragon Quest because you can play it in portrait mode. It doesn't have to be landscape, whereas the Final Fantasy games you can only play them in landscape. So that's just, that's a petty thing of mine, but so I played Final Fantasy 1 on the Pixel Remaster on mobile. I had a great time doing it. I did achieve 100% completion with it in just under 16 hours. So it's not a long game. It's not a terribly long game. I would say for what I paid for it, which I think I got it on sale at the time, it might have been like $6. Totally worth it. Totally 100% worth the price tag of that. Great bang for your buck. It's a good, solid, 14 hours, I want to say, of gameplay. If you kind of blast through it, it's like 14 hours. I went back and did a lot of the extra completionist shit to get 100% because it was really easy to. But it was a great time. I had a very good time, and I will be rating this at the end, but just know at the beginning, I had a good time. I enjoyed it. So to kind of get right into things, let's see, did I write anything? I'm kind of trying to turn, like I've said in the most recent episodes, I'm kind of making this a little bit more of like a actual video game journal documentation sort of podcast. So I have a bunch more notes written that I'm probably not really going to get into all that much. That's more for like me to maybe post on the website or blog or whatever. But I will say, I did a little bit more research on this one due to this being such a retro game, and there's a lot of different places you can find this. If you have any interest in playing the first Final Fantasy, you can pick up the Pixel Remaster on the Switch, PS4, Xbox Series X and S, Microsoft Windows, and mobile on both Android and iOS. I played it on iOS, like I said, last month. That's pretty much it. I wrote some things here. Like, I'm sorry, this is totally newbie of me. I'm trying to kind of get into a rhythm here, but I try to write like the designer and the developer, which for this it was Toes and Square, publisher by Square Enix, and then similar games I wrote Dragon Quest really as my main similarity because technically that did come first. But yeah, so that's the basic information on this game. If you're unaware or unfamiliar with Final Fantasy for some reason, it is one of Square Enix's top franchises. It's been around forever. There's like 40 of them, side spin-offs and everything like that. There's so many fucking Final Fantasy games. But we're going to talk about the first. And as I like to do, I like to start off with what I don't really like about the game and then finish off with everything that I do like about the game because there's usually more to praise about the games that I talk about. So getting into the dislikes, the first the first thing that kind of like I don't know, I wasn't crazy about, and I can kind of forgive them for this because it was their first outing for a Final Fantasy game, but the mana system in Final Fantasy 1 as well as the spells and kind of magic system was just a little weird. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but and it makes sense later, but I didn't really like it that much. So the way that it works in Final Fantasy 1 is you have an individual mana counter for each level of spell casting that you're going to do. So there's I think 8 levels of spells in the game. So you start off by being able to purchase level 1 spells in like the first town you end up with for either your white mage or your black mage, and that's something else I'll get into in a minute. But so you start off by purchasing level 1 spells, very basic, weak spells, can't be leveled up no matter how much you use them. Very basic is what you start with. And as you progress throughout the game and reach, further villages and higher level areas, you come across towns and vendors, magic vendors that sell higher level spells up to level 8. And you don't need to find all the spells of level 4 before you can buy them for level 5. You can go from like buying level 1, 2, and 3 spells to level 7 spells if you find the next town like that. It's fucking weird. And there are limited amount of spells that you can purchase for each level. So you have like I think 3 slots for each level of spell that you could use. So I can have 3 level 1 spells, 3 level 2 spells, 3 level 3, etc. But there's like 5 or 6 choices throughout the game. So you kind of have to strategize which ones you buy and how you're going to play. This game didn't really implement weaknesses like in Final Fantasy 2. If you're familiar, they kind of did it like Pokemon in Final Fantasy 2 where like certain enemies are weaker to certain different types of magic. They didn't really have that in the first one. But there's curse magic, poison, stuff like that, debuffs, buffs, healing, blah, blah, blah. But then the way that the mana system worked is you'll have like a certain amount of spell casts per each level of spell. So if I want to cast my level 1 spells, I'll have 30 casts available. I'll have 30 mana for level 1 spells, and then I'll have 27 mana for level 2 spells, and then 8 mana for level 8 spells. It's like, obviously the more powerful the spell, the fewer casts of it you have, but it's like that does level up that does increase as you level up, but it's just weird. It made the menu navigation a little bit tricky. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me in the beginning. I ended up getting it later, but then when you go to use like your ether to give yourself more mana, it gives you 1 extra spell cast per ether used. So it's like if you're trying to refill your level 8 mana by, in between battles later in the game, then you're going to sit there and you're going to use like 20 ethers to fucking give yourself full mana so that you can go into the next big fight. It's kind of weird. It wasn't impossible. It was obviously it wasn't impossible by 100% of the game, but it was just weird. That's all I'll say. I've never played a game that had a mana system like that. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. So that was just a little bit strange. But in the end, it did end up making sense. It was enjoyable. It was usable. It was just weird. So I didn't really care for it. So that's kind of like a 2 for 1. I wrote those technically as 2 separate dislikes. And then really the only other dislike that I have for this game is that there is an HP cap of 999, which again, it doesn't stop you from beating the game. It kind of does make the last boss fight kind of difficult. Like even though I was level 61 when I finished the game, it was still kind of a challenge, the last boss fight, which is a good thing. It's good to have a little bit of a challenge. You don't want to just cakewalk the whole thing, but it was, that boss hits fucking hard, And it having only 999 health, where like in Final Fantasy 2 my characters had like 4,000 health. It made it a lot easier, but being capped at 999 was kind of tricky. So I do wish that they would have let the cap be a bit higher than that, or just not capped it at all. I don't know. That's just me. But the only character that I got up to that HP level anyway was my warrior, and all the other one. I think the next closest one was like 800 something. Like it takes a lot of leveling to get up to that kind of HP cap, and I was not about to grind it until level 99. That would have taken months. But I will say the way that the classes work, if you're familiar with Final Fantasy, the old school ones, which I'm only just now getting familiarized with, I have not played a lot of the Final Fantasy games. I have played a lot of JRPGs in my time, but I have not played a lot of these ones, which is why I'm going back and starting from the beginning. So if anything that I say sounds like common knowledge and it's not, or if I say it doesn't sound like it but it is, then please forgive me because I'm still getting used to this. But the class choice system in the first Final Fantasy was different for me because I've never played a game where you get to choose your class in the beginning. So I ended up just going with the standard that they give you right off the bat, which is a warrior, a thief, a white mage, and a black mage. I don't know if you're able to change it actually, because I didn't even really try. But that was the four that I went with, and the warrior is kind of like your standard, melee brawler tank. You just give him every bit of heavy armor you can use. The thief, I don't really know what the thief's major ability is. I don't know if it's evasion, accuracy, what. But then the white mage and the black mage, that's where the difference really is important. The white mage is only capable of using white magic spells, which include things like healing, curing, reviving, buffing, stuff like that. It's not really much of a combat character, but you can use combat with it. But then the black mage, that is more for your combat magic. That's where you have your attack spells, your fire, your thunder, your ice, curses, poisons, whatever. So it's not really possible to give yourself a bad build, I feel like, being that, like, if you just use those four and then just kind of give your characters the appropriate armor, weapon, and spell upgrades throughout the game, it's kind of linear, at least with this one. I understand that there's a lot of RPGs out there that give you like 60 people in your party, and even some of the later Dragon Quest games like 4 and 5, you end up getting a lot of people that you can kind of, even Final Fantasy 2 actually, you can give your fucking whatever characters whatever spells and whatever you want, and you can really kind of mess yourself up. But with Final Fantasy 1, you are pretty locked in to having very particular choices. You cannot give your white mage black magic spells. You cannot give your black mage white magic spells. You cannot give your warrior any magic spells. It's just the way that it is. So you have to strategize a little bit, but not that crazy. But yeah, so those were the class choices that I went with in this game, and I ended up having a fairly easy time. I had a good time playing this, but it wasn't that crazy. So to get into some of the likes that I would like to talk about, I do have a pretty comprehensive list of likes here. Some of them are story beat related, so I'll try to leave those towards the end in case they spoil anything. But the first thing that I'll say is that this game has turn-based combat without a timer, which I think is fantastic. That's why I love the Persona games. I love the Pokemon games. I love when I can actually sit and kind of think for a minute about what attacks, what buffs, what spells, what items, what I want to do for my turn in a turn-based combat game. That is another reason why I was not... I mean, I played through a little bit of Final Fantasy VII. I have not beaten it. I like it, but what annoyed me about it was that every attack is on a timer. It's like... I understand it's more realistic, I guess, that if you just sit there in the middle of a fight, just sitting there, you're going to get your ass kicked. But I don't know. I think for a turn-based combat game... Hello, cat. I think for a turn-based combat game, it's kind of nice to be able to, use your turn wisely and not have to worry about a time rush. So I like that in this game you're not constricted to having to rush through each turn, even though, once you kind of get used to the game, you get used to the enemies, you kind of know what attacks you're going to use all the time and what you're going to do each turn. But it's still nice to be able to take that breather to think about it. So having turn-based combat without using a timer, that's a plus in my book. The the game itself, and the next like that I'm going to say is the game itself is relatively basic. I know that, going back to 1987, playing an RPG from way back then, it's gonna be, by today's standards, basic. But it's real easy to turn on and off. Especially with the Pixel Remaster mobile version, you can quick save it pretty much anywhere, in a dungeon, out in the main world, in a town, doesn't matter. You just quick save it and turn it off. I like that. That's a convenience thing that's perfect for me. If I'm like sitting in a car and I'm just waiting for 5 minutes and I'm like, all right, I can go grind some levels for 5 minutes. So I turn on my phone, go into Final Fantasy, load it up right away, walk around for 5 minutes, kill a bunch of enemies, and then it's time to go. So I just save it, turn it right off, get out of my car. It's a really nice quality of life feature to have, especially nowadays. And if you're going to be playing it on mobile, to have to play a game on mobile, especially, and have to try to find a particular save point is a fucking pain in the ass. And I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the third. It's either the first or the third Dragon Quest. I don't remember if you could quick save or not. I think you could, but you had to also go to the king to save in some kingdoms and whatever, and that was just annoying. And like if you could quick save out in the world, but if you want to do like an official save, you had to go find the king in the nearest kingdom, talk to him, and then he would save your game for you and tell you what your next level up XP counter is. So like I can imagine back in the day, like if I was a kid playing this on the Super Nintendo or the NES, and I had to go, try to survive and make it back to the nearest kingdom or nearest village or inn or rest point or whatever, just to save my game. Like I imagine if my parents are waiting to have dinner and they're yelling across the house, like, turn your fucking game off, come sit down. Like, hold on, Mom, give me 10 minutes. I gotta walk back to the nearest kingdom. I gotta find my way out of this dungeon to walk to the nearest kingdom to talk to the king to save the game so I can turn it off without losing an hour worth of progress. That would be very annoying. It's so nice in today's day and age to be able to just quick save and shut it off. I just love that. That's just my rant about that. It's just the best. So yeah, I did write quick save on mobile as the next like, so I'll just give that a 2 for as well. The next like I have is the story. Now Final Fantasy, again, by today's standards, minus maybe Final Fantasy 15, due to all its plot holes, but they're very known for having very, 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 very compelling stories, which is a big draw for me. I love games that have well-written, well-fleshed out stories. That's why I'm such a big fan of Persona. If you haven't listened to my Persona 5 episode, just go listen to that. Listen to me praise that game for an hour. But I love a good, well-written story, and Final Fantasy 1 is no exception. It's, all things considered, it's pretty basic. It was their first outing in 1987 for how can we really take a video game of all things back then and give it a seriously compelling, well-written, fleshed out story, something that will keep people playing. It wasn't common, and there weren't a lot of games out there that at the time that were, very, very story heavy like this. So I mean, you had Dragon Quest, but Dragon Quest 1 was very basic. But this one, it actually had a pretty good story beat, and it had, it was pretty well paced. You had the 4 elemental fiends. There was a time loop, go back in time kind of thing, like 2,000 years, kind of like, think of like Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time kind of time loop. You enter a temple, you go back 2,000 years sort of thing. So it did have something like that. It was a very like basic premise in the beginning, saying like, oh, the world is clouded in darkness and the seas are raging and the winds are dying and blah blah blah. But it actually ended up being a pretty well fleshed out story, and I give them props for that. So it was presented very well. Um, you don't need a whole lot of mental capacity to keep it in the back of your head while you're playing through it. It's not like you're, bookmarking a million things in your mind playing through the game, like a lot of the, I guess more advanced or more recent RPGs. It's kind of just like you taking it one step at a time. You're going from village to village, and there are quite a few times where I almost got stuck, but I ended up not needing a walkthrough because again, the game is not that difficult. Um, I think this one also had, if I'm not mistaken, forgive me because I played 1 and 2 back to back, so I don't remember exactly which one. I think it was the first one had this character. It was a dancer in the first major town you go to. Sorry, that was my cat. But they had this dancer in like the first major town that you go to, and she was there specifically to give you direction on where to go next. So if you get lost up until a certain point in the game, because then she stops having any information for you, then it's kind of like you should know what you're doing by now. But for the first like half of the game, while you're traversing the world, if you end up getting stuck or you forget kind of where you're going, you could go talk to her, and she'll give you like a bit of a, like, I don't know, simple, I don't fucking know how to say it, but she'll give you like a basic direction of where to go, or like, oh, have you heard that this town had this problem, or oh, have you heard that this person had this, or whatever. So it kind of like points you in the right direction, and then you can kind of go figure it out from there yourself. I think there was really only one time that I had to pull up a tutorial in this whole game, and it was when, spoiler alert, you end up having to find a Rosetta Stone to learn a language. And I went through the dungeon, I found the object, and then I was like, okay, how do I use this? Who do I go to? And at that point, I was confused, and I ended up having to look up a walkthrough. That one was not obvious to me. Maybe that's just on me. But but the story, I mean, the story wasn't all that hard to follow. It was pretty entertaining. Had a pretty good ending. I liked it a lot. Killing Chaos at the end, which I'm not gonna say who it was or how you get there, but it was cool. I liked it. But one thing that I will say about this game that I think was ahead of its time, and I wish the second game did this. I'm surprised it didn't actually. But the first Final Fantasy game actually had a bit of a tutorial section, which I much appreciated. So if you haven't played a lot of the retro, or like, kind of the old school RPGs like this, or JRPGs, they kind of just let you go wherever you want, from the beginning. So you can walk right out of the first kingdom and then go in any direction, kind of like, any RPG really, any open world RPG. You can kind of just pick a direction and go. But with these games, it's a little trickier because, as opposed to like if you look at Fallout, like Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 4, those games, Western RPGs, you step out in the world, you can go wherever you want, but you also see the enemies that you're going to encounter, which gives you time to turn around and walk away. In these old school JRPGs, you pick a direction, you start walking. If you happen to cross the threshold into the next difficulty area without knowing it, you get thrown right into a combat sequence that you can't escape from, and you will die. And if you happened to do a bunch of leveling without saving, you lost all of that. There is a permadeath system in these games, and it's a pain in the ass. So unless you have experience playing these JRPGs, then you wouldn't really know that you need to be careful where you go right off the beginning, especially. You need to talk to the NPCs in the town, and they will give you a general direction of where to go. However, in this game, you really only have one choice, which is quite nice. So you speak with the king, you speak with the people that you have in the first kingdom that you start in, and they give you a basic direction saying, hey, we have this issue. I'm not going to get into super spoilers about it, so even though it's the beginning of the game, but they're going to say, hey, we have this issue. There's this knight that, is amazing, but he's a thorn on our side, and you need to go up to this chaos shrine and defeat him and, save the world. So right there, bang, you have a direction, you have a goal, you have a character you're looking for, you have a place to go, and you set off on your journey. You go out of the kingdom, you level up a little bit by fighting some basic enemies, get some better armor, weapon, whatever, make your way up to the chaos shrine, and then do what you gotta do. Once you're finished with that, and you make it back to the kingdom. The king. Let me preface this. The king says, if you do this for me, then I will rebuild the bridge leading out of this kingdom, which will then open up the rest of the world for you to explore. So, literally, until you complete that basic beginning tutorial section, you cannot leave the opening intro area, which for anybody who is inexperienced with these games, like I said, it is perfect. You cannot fuck it up. You cannot accidentally walk from a level 1 area to a level 7 area like you can in every other fucking game of this series. Because I tried playing Final Fantasy 3 10 years ago, and I at that time was very unaware of how JRPGs worked, at least, Final Fantasies and Dragon Quests and whatever. So that was the problem I kept running into, is I would keep leaving the kingdom and walking like, I don't know, 20 paces to the left, and all of a sudden I'm getting killed, just absolutely smacked down by an enemy 7 times my level. I'm like, how the fuck are you supposed to play this game? So maybe me going back and playing all these old school RPGs is just trying to, take revenge on my experiences from the past, but I'm having a blast doing it, and I'm going to keep talking about them. So, but yes, this game, I love that there is a tutorial section like that, which like I said, you do not get very often at all, especially back then. Dragon Quest didn't do it. None of the Dragon Quests that I've played, 1 through 5, have done it. Final Fantasy 2 definitely didn't do it. Final Fantasy 1, points for them. So moving on from there, another thing that I like about this game, and a lot of RPGs, Final Fantasy especially, really Final Fantasy, they have famous traversal methods. So I've played Final Fantasy 15, I've played Final Fantasy 7 a good way through, the old school one, like the PS1 version. And yeah, there's definitely, like, they have their famous characters, Cid with the airship. So you always end up getting an airship of some kind. You always end up having a better way of traversal later on. You always start on foot, except for in Final Fantasy 15 with the, road trip simulator. But in this game, it's obviously the first time they've ever done it. So you end up going from on foot. They have the staple traversal upgrades, is what I'm trying to say. But you start on foot, walking around the islands, the kingdoms, whatever, and then you end up getting a sea ship. Then you end up getting a canoe, which was a little different. With the games that I have played in my life, I'm not used to getting a canoe. That was different. But you do end up getting a canoe in this game and the second one. It allows you to traverse up rivers and lakes and stuff like that, where you can't take your sea ship. So that usually leads to a couple of specific dungeons that you can get to that you wouldn't be able to get to without the canoe. So you go from on foot to sea ship to canoe to airship. Once you get the airship, then you can finally explore the rest of the map. And I love the way that Final Fantasy does that. It cements a pacing system into the game, and it allows for pretty much infinite backtracking as well. So as long as you have constant access to these vehicles, you're never stuck, really. You can always go back. If you miss a treasure, you can always go back to a dungeon. At least in this game, none of the dungeons get blown up or caves get closed in. Nothing like that ever happens. So it's very nice that you can't really go into areas that are too advanced for you, because you're not going to have the ability to be on foot and be getting to areas that you could only access with an airship. So it is kind of nice. This game, it doesn't really hold your hand, but it does kind of keep you back from inevitable danger. There are definitely still ways to screw yourself, don't get me wrong, but it's a little bit harder in this one. So it is nice, the pacing that they really kind of hardwire into the game prevents you from dying too much prematurely, and it also allows you to go back and close up or tie up any loose ends that you might have forgotten. So that is definitely a like on this list. The next one is There's an Easter egg in the town called Elfheim, and if you have played the game, you probably know where I'm going with this. This is a really quick one, but there's just a headstone that you can find in the town of Elfheim that literally once you go up and read it, it just says "Here lies Link," and for a non first party Nintendo developer, or for a non first party Nintendo developer, for them to throw in an Easter egg like that, I thought was just great. And I think that goes all the way back to the original 1987 release, but they still have it on the Pixel Remaster iOS version, and I thought that was fucking hilarious. I sent a screenshot of that to my friend Nick, who you may or may not know from the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time episode, because he's one of the biggest Zelda fans I know, and he loved it. But yeah, so that's just a quick little like I had in there. That was really the only Easter egg that I could find in the game. I couldn't really. I mean, maybe I'm just. I don't know. Maybe I'm not old enough to understand some of the other things, but I didn't really find any major Easter eggs in the game other than that. But there's so moving on from there, and I am reading from a list here, which is why it's kind of like whatever. But there's an achievement in the Pixel Remaster version for getting Excalibur. They don't make that a necessity, and I can tell you that it's not a necessity because I beat the game without doing it. I had to go back after the fact and do it. I actually had to look up how to do it because there is a point where you reach this dwelling, this cave of dwarves, and there's a blacksmith in there, and he talks about how he wants nothing more than to get his hands on some legendary crafting material, adamantite, and he could probably create the best weapon in the world with it. So you end up finding it if you it's not a mandatory find. You can kind of just stumble across it, which is what I did. I didn't realize that I had even found it, but once I found it, I didn't really know what to do with it either. I thought, okay, cool, maybe it's just something that I'll end up using later in a quest. But you actually have to take that adamantite back to that dwarf blacksmith, and then he will make you Excalibur, which I don't remember if it's the best sword in the game or not. I think that it might not be, because the Final Fantasy games always have Masamune, I think it's called. Also, I don't know if that one was in the first game. My information's all fucked up, like I said, because I played the first one and the second one literally back to back, and I know the second one I got Masamune, but they also have Excalibur, and it's not worth it. So I beat the game, the first one, without Excalibur. You don't need it. It's a cool find. It's an achievement if you're going for completion. That's how you do it, but it's not required. But I do find it kind of cool that it is an option, and you can end up getting Excalibur a good amount of time before you get to the very end of the game. So it will be a helping hand, but it is certainly not necessary. Next up, the next like I have is another pacing thing, because I study game design, and that's actually what I'm going for my bachelor's degree in right now is game design. So I always appreciate the way that developers and designers will pace a game, and just, it may not seem like a lot, but a lot of thought goes into it, and I think that it's really great the way that they did it in this one with the 4 different elementals, the fiends. They make the whole story is around these fiends and the way that they're awakening, but it's kind of set up similarly to like a Legend of Zelda dungeon layout, sort of. It's like you start in the beginning of the game and you're going after the earth fiend, and then that's kind of like the Deku tree dungeon. It's like you go from like earth to fire to water to whatever. So the way that they have it set up is kind of basic, but it's very useful. So again, you're not going to go from the beginning of the game to going into the third dungeon, the third major dungeon, and just absolutely getting smacked. You end up having to go from the beginning of the game to the Earth Fiend to I think it was you went from like earth to fire to water to air, and it was just nice. It was just, I just want to praise them for the way that they designed the game, the way that they paced the story out with the fiends, and they didn't throw a whole lot of bullshit in the middle. It made it for a pretty pleasant, easy to get along with, easy to turn on and off experience that was fun. all things considered, in the end, I had fun, and I will continue to say that. I sound like a broken record, but it's a fun game. So that's really all I want to talk about with the pacing. I keep bringing that up, but it was done well. It wasn't. There weren't a whole lot of major peaks and valleys with the pace of the game. Like, you didn't have really any spot in this game where I like plateaued, where I was kind of just doing the same shit for an hour or two or three even. Like in Final Fantasy 2, which I will make an episode on that in the coming weeks. But I had a much harder time with that game because, granted, the story was a little bit more confusing. The hints were a lot more few and far between. Sometimes you would run into areas or parts of the game where they just gave you absolutely no direction, and I couldn't figure it out. And I was on a flight back from fucking Japan, which is 12 hours long, and I didn't have any internet, so I couldn't look up a walkthrough. So I literally stayed awake and grinded levels for 8 hours until I figured out how to fucking progress. But that's going to be a whole rant for a different episode. But this game didn't really do that. And there wasn't really a whole lot of like, I'm hitting a difficulty spike, so I have to grind, like these old RPGs are known for. It was pretty evenly paced the whole time. There was definitely your climb to a climax boss, and then a dip in a relaxing state, and then a climb to the next boss fight, and then a dip in a relaxing state. So there was that solid, golden path flow of gaming, but it wasn't any kind of crazy difficulty spike to plateau of gameplay where I'm grinding for levels and trying to level up, and then I'm going back up to another climax, and then I'm plateauing again. It wasn't like that. It was very well paced and easy to enjoy. So that's my praise for their pacing on this, and it's very important. If you do not pace your game well, it's gonna just run into so many fucking issues. Like, I could definitely think of a lot of games off the top of my head that are not paced well, and there are some on my back catalog, like Dismantle, that it was not paced well. It really wasn't. It was all over the fucking place, and at the end of the day, at the end of the game, I quit because it was just a fucking train wreck at the end. And it was, you built up all this pace, you kind of get into a flow, you spend 40 hours playing this fucking game, all of a sudden it throws a curveball at you of gameplay that you weren't expecting. It's very difficult, and it's almost impossible to beat. So yeah, like, pacing is extremely important, and when done well, it's almost unnoticeable, I feel like. But when it's done wrong, it's all you remember. But moving on from that, I digress. The last few things that I have to say here is, in terms of likes, is I liked in the story that there is a point where towards the end of the game you do go, like, your characters, you have this interaction with like a king dragon, and you end up getting like a character class upgrade, which is just cool. It ends up giving your characters a whole different look, like a second skin, like it's like your final form. And I don't know, I thought it was a really cool thing. It adds a little bit more to the story, saying like, you guys are the true heroes of the realm. You're off on your final quest now. Go get them, Tiger. Enjoy. I thought it was just a cool little thing. I don't really think it adds a whole lot to the actual character stats or any of your abilities. I think it's just a cool, like, story beat. I like that. But yeah, the only other thing that I really want to say is, actually, that pretty much wraps it up. The only other things that I have written down here is I liked that it has a time travel loop. It's very basic, again, all things considered, compared to what we have today with, games like Deathloop and some of these crazy, like, absolute fucking mind-bending quantum mechanic bullshit we have going on. But this was very similar to, like I said, the Zelda games with like the Temple of Time, and just how, you go into step into one place and it takes you back, and it's kind of like a cool perspective from a different time. I like that. I think it always kind of hits that nostalgia bone, because you kind of, in this game, you walk around the Chaos Shrine, and spoiler alert, the time loop takes place in the Chaos Shrine. So it's cool that the the first place that you're really tasked with exploring in this game is the Chaos Shrine, which is also the very last place you end up going to at the end of the game. So the game kind of makes this like perfect loop. But in the beginning of the game, when you go to the Chaos Shrine, it's very dilapidated, it's run down, it's, you know, an ancient relic from, you know, from an ancient world. So it's, you don't really think much of it when you're there in the beginning, but then when you get back there towards the end of the game for the final boss fight, now it's a whole dungeon. Now, like, you go back in time 2,000 years, and now it's this, you know, this gilded castle. Everything is nice and it's fancy. There's torches lit. There's gold on the walls. There's, you know, it's beautiful. And you follow this dungeon, you get to the final boss fight, and it's just this whole experience. It's kind of like, I just enjoy when games do something like that, and they kind of take what you already knew of a certain area in the game and turn it completely on its head, and kind of like give you this different perspective of how life used to be. Like, I'm a person who is fascinated by aspects of the ancient world, and things, anything that kind of plays on that card, of time loop and stuff. Like, I think my favorite game that did it in the Zelda franchise was the Twilight Princess video game. When you go back in the Temple of Time in that game, I thought that was really, really well done. But I also just love games like, you know, the Assassin's Creed games, where you end up seeing parts of, you know, the ancient world that, you know, granted, yeah, it's just in video game format, but it's still cool to see. You know, it's cool the way that some of these video game designers and developers have created, or, you know, kind of brought back to life some of these ancient places. Like Assassin's Creed Origins did a really cool job with it, with the Library of Alexandria and the pyramids, and I think that that's really, really cool. And like when I was in Thailand, you know, pardon my ignorance, I had no idea that Thailand was ancient Siam. So when I learned that, I was like, oh my god, I need to look up some of these temples and some of these things, because it's another ancient world, and I had no idea. So it's just really cool to kind of see stuff like that happen. And I think that when games, even like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, they do that, and you end up going back to a part of the world in the game that now they show it to you in a different light, in its original form, back in its heyday. I think it's fantastic. It's a lovely touch that is a key, that is a story thing that, like, it always hits me in a good way when done well. I can't really think of a lot of games that have done it poorly, but I like that. So that's my list. That's what I like, that's what I don't like. All in all, I had a very good time playing this game. Good enough for me to go back and 100% it, like I said, which I don't do with a lot of games. I'll start to, and then I end up getting bored, or I end up just getting overwhelmed or frustrated. But this time it was pretty fairly simple. I had a good time doing it, and again, praise to the Pixel Remaster on iOS. It plays really well. It's smooth. It's only a couple bucks, and you can quick save. That's like the hugest thing. But to wrap this up, to give this game a rating, I'm gonna say, with everything that I've just talked about on this list, I don't have a whole lot of dislikes, but they, with the mobile version of this, it's gonna get kind of petty here. The joystick is a fucking pain in the ass. The touch controls can be kind of annoying. It works perfectly well, but I got fat fingers, and sometimes it's a pain in the butt. So that takes a couple of points away, just because it's, you know, you go to use the joystick that they have laid out on the screen, and if your input's not perfect, it's going to be all wrong. So that ended up getting me caught in a couple of extra random encounters that I wish I didn't, or, you know, getting caught in a couple of trap tiles that I wish I didn't. So that made for a bit of an annoying experience at times. But yeah, all in all, with everything that I've talked about on this list, with my likes and my dislikes, I'm going to give this game an 8 out of 10. I think that's a perfectly fair score. It's not a perfect game. It is a good game. It's very enjoyable. And again, you can beat it in under 20 hours, well under 20 hours. Solid story, great music, fun visuals, especially on the Pixel Remaster. They did a really good job with the artwork on this game. And yeah, I do recommend it. I give it a solid 8 out of 10. So thank you very much for listening. Thanks for coming to another one of my video game journal documentary uh, entries. If you like what you hear, please leave a like, leave a follow. It all really helps me very much. And if you like what you hear and you would like to reach out to me, give me any game recommendations or drop your thoughts, you can find me primarily over on Instagram at the Bards of Gaming, or you can find me on X or Twitter at 2Bards of Gaming with the number 2. You can find links to all my socials as well as my email. And again, do not, if you're listening to my last episode, don't buy merchandise right now. But I'm working on changing that up. But yeah, you can find links to all that stuff over at the bardsofgamingpodcast.com. And if you shoot me a message, I'd love to talk video games with anybody. I'm more than happy to talk. And yeah, so please leave a like, leave a follow, and leave some love, leave a comment. I would love to hear your feedback, good or bad. If I could improve the show in any way, shape, or form, just let me know. And thank you again for listening, and you guys have a great night.